Okay, we're at the New England Authors Expo again, and right now we're talking to Katie. Talk a little bit about what you have to offer here today and a little bit of your background, if you don't mind.
Well, I write locally set mysteries. The books are all set in the New Hampshire Seacoast. Each begins and ends in the fictionalized town of Rye Harbor, New Hampshire.
Okay.
Although I will say some of the books do travel out of the area, but they always return back. And it's a continuing story. The same cast of characters carries through all of the stories. And there's a little mystery, a little suspense. Got to have some romance.
Right.
Toss in a dead body every now and then. So it's pretty much just like our lives.
Okay.
They're fun books.
Right.
And where I've tried to, I use real locations, real settings, so people can really relate to the books.
Right.
Because they can be driving along and say, hey, that's where this happened, or that's where that happened.
Oh, that sounds great.
Which, makes it relatable, I guess, is maybe the word.
Do you have a lot of pictures and background pictures or anything else that you do?
No.
In the books, it's purely writing?
Nope, they're just...
and where do you get your ideas from? Just life itself?
I have no idea where my ideas come from.
Out of this guy.
Pretty much. Each of the stories, the characters write the story. So when I begin work, usually I have just a scene or a location, some little nugget, some little kernel from which the story then builds.
Right.
Each one has been very different. And sometimes that ends up being in the beginning of the book. Sometimes it ends up being the end of the book, or the middle. And then, I'm either writing forwards or backwards or both. And it's kind of how these characters deal with life and what this circumstance has put them in. I work an hour a day, and I know that if I work...
You don't go from like page 1 to the end, you just...
No. I work... Well, the stories grow organically, I guess.
True.
I learned that consistency of effort is the most important thing. And I learned from that if I work an hour a day, I can write a book a year. Now, what's not to love about that?
Yeah,
it's a great situation.
For sure.
When you asked about kind of what my process is or how I do this, I don't have an easy answer. But what I do tell people is that I belong to what I call the Nike School of Writing. Just do it. Because until you put words on paper, you have nothing.
Right.
But once you start putting words on paper, then the story begins to grow, it begins to develop. The characters take you in places you did not expect to go. And it just happens.
So how long have you been doing this?
The first book came out in 2009, so it's been about 10 years.
Right.
Yep.
And what caught you to doing that? And what
Too much red wine in a bar one night. Very honest answer. I used to be in the restaurant business. And when that was coming to a close, and I was thinking about what I could possibly do after, this came out of it. But it wasn't anything I ever aspired to do. It wasn't anything I ever thought I would ever do. It just happened.
So you live on the seacoast? Is that
I do.
Okay, that's how come.
And my first efforts were really rough. I mean, it took me about 2 years to learn how to write. The first book I rewrote 8 complete times before it was actually publishable.
Very good.
I mean, it was horrible.
Yeah.
Honestly, it was horrible.
Now it's easy, right?
And it's never easy. But
How many books do you have out then?
I have 10.
10.
And I'm working on
10.
number 11.
Excellent, excellent. You
Yeah.
want to talk about at least one of them? Feature?
Well, you know, there's a couple books that have some significant things that I've done with the
Okay,
stories.
all right.
The first book, Harbor Ice,
Okay.
is where it all began, and that is probably the most pure, standalone, whodunit type mystery. For the simple reason I did not know that there would be subsequent books.
Yeah, yeah.
That turned out to be so much fun to do, I decided to write a second book. And I decided, well, I'll just keep the same cast of characters.
Right.
And that's where I began
Beautiful.
to build their
Great idea.
lives. And that was Changing Tides. Now, the fourth book, Killer Run, is where some things, interesting things happened.
Mm-hmm.
3 things with that book. First, a new character was introduced. She was strictly incidental to that story. I did not anticipate ever seeing her again. It was just a vehicle in the story. But there was such a strong reaction to her existence, very negative, I might add,
Okay.
that I have to keep bringing her back because she causes nothing but trouble.
That's
And
great. That's
she
great.
was great. I also began with that book putting recipes in the back of the books. So if there are particular meals or drinks or desserts that play into the story, I now include recipes in the back of each story. And that
Excellent.
started with that one. But most important with this fourth book, and
Yeah,
I'll pick
yeah.
this up so you can
Sure.
see it well.
Yep.
But if you look at that cover, that sounds very ominous, Killer Run, and we've got a dead body here. However, this picture is proof positive that I have legs to die for, because that's me.
Oh, that's great to know.
That's
good,
about
good.
as cheesy as I can get.
Okay. All the secrets. You're telling all the secrets. That's great.
Then, a little further down, in the seventh book, Black Schooner,
Yeah.
I began adding a page in the back of the book called Reality in the Fiction of, and that title.
Yep.
So anytime I use a real location or a real restaurant or whatever it is, doesn't matter, I will note what chapter that, it would be chapter 7, Hampton Beach State Park, and then I'll have the website
Very
for
good.
that
That's
location.
great, yeah.
So that, and I started with the seventh book,
a
and I've
great
continued
idea,
that.
yeah.
So I think that grounds the reader into the story.
True.
It just makes it that much more real to them.
It's like touching them.
And exactly. And that's been fun. Some of the books have traveled. The latest book spent most of the time in Southern California before returning home. The second book was mostly on a sailboat in Belize
Oh, see.
before returning home. So they do travel, but they always come back.
Well, thank you. Any
Thank you
words
very
of,
much.
Any words of advice for any possible authors? Or?
Like I said, join the Nike School of Writing and just do it.
Okay.
There are resources, there are people out in the world who will help make you better.
Excellent.
But until you put your thoughts down, till you put it on paper, you got nothing. So just do it.
Katie
Absolutely.
Mason, thank you very much.
Thank you very
All
much.
right,
It was so
great.
nice talking with you.
Excellent. Thank
Yes.
you.
Talking